Well, hello, Grace Church. My name is Kyle Mullins, and I serve as the student director at our Olathe campus. And if you have been following along with the Grace Church sermon series throughout this year, we have been in a theme that has driven all that we do in 2025, and it's called One Vision, Seeing as God Sees. And we are currently in a particular sermon series right now that is centered around seeing money as God sees. Now, this Seeing Money series has an overarching verse that's been driving everything we talk about every week of it. And it's an incredibly convenient verse to memorize and challenge you to. It's Luke 1, 2, 3, 4, Luke 12:34. And it says this: "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." That has been the driving theme of each sermon in this series. Week 1, we kicked off with seeing money as His. Week 2, we just had seeing money as a tool. And now we're in week 3, which is seeing the love of money as evil. Now, I will be serving as bad cop for this series, so buckle up because we're about to get into it. And you might be thinking, joke's on you, preacher man. I don't even have enough money to be evil with it. And that's fair, but this sermon isn't actually a condemnation of billionaires. There's plenty of room for discussion on the morality of billionaires, but to take the teachings of Jesus and direct them to others that we see around us would be to completely miss the point of what God wants to do in and through us through the living, breathing Word of God. Now, if you're skeptic of this series or of this particular talk, good. You should be. There's a lot of things that I think is healthy to be skeptic of in this whole Christian thing. Have you read the Bible? It gets really weird. You should ask some follow-up questions about some of the stuff that's in there. And a guy with a microphone can get up and say, the love of money is evil. But we've got critical thinkers that are immediately going towards, does that necessarily always have to be true? What about people I can think of right now who love money and don't seem evil at all to me? Or what about just the reality of how much it simply costs to survive today, let alone to be generous with any of it? Even Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a German pastor and theologian, dropped this in his book, The Cost of Discipleship. He says, "Why should we not be happy children of the world just because we are the children of God? After all, do we not rejoice in His good gifts? And do we not receive our treasure as a blessing from Him?" He's saying, why can't we love money and give thanks to God from whom the money we love comes from? It's a hard point to argue with. It's even harder to argue with the more money that you have. Now, I know that the amount of money at the disposal of people throughout our church varies dramatically. But we have got to keep in mind, and we can't lose sight of the fact that if you attend Grace Church, that you are, from a global perspective, part of one of the wealthiest gatherings in the world, in the most powerful nation in the world, and we are studying the teachings of an ancient homeless Jewish man who taught radical generosity to not only the wealthy, but to the poor and to the oppressed. If that contrast is lost on us, then we will very quickly be taking these words from Scripture and trying to fit them into our agenda as opposed to getting our hearts on the same page as God. Now, Ryan did a fantastic job last week unpacking how we can use money as a tool for incredible kingdom impact. But if we're going to start to be weary of and watch out for how we can become a tool that is serving money, we got to take some cues from the Apostle Paul when he is writing to his young disciple, Timothy. Now, Paul wrote the letter of 1 Timothy after learning that some of the leaders at the church in Ephesus had been twisting the gospel message that he first brought them. They were mixing and matching Jewish customs and teachings and baking them modern philosophies into the gospel and creating all sorts of unnecessary rules and hurdles that they had to follow in order to also be one with God and to grow in their faith. And at the same time, they were also allowing wildly immoral behavior. So everything was just getting very far off. And Paul wrote this letter to his young disciple Timothy to help him know how to navigate these tensions, but also for it to be read aloud to the church in Ephesus. Now, after he had written that and gave it to him, it's weird how the conclusion of this letter goes, because you got 5 chapters of unpacking all the things they're doing wrong that they need to fix, all the ways that their pursuit of God has been warped. And then the crescendo, the end of it all in chapter 6 is this weirdly placed long rant on money, almost implying that their greed is at the heart of everything else that he has been addressing through the entirety of this letter. It says this in 1 Timothy 6, verses 6 to 9. Now godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. Just food and clothing. My wife and I got married when I was a part-time student ministry intern at a church and part-time waiting tables. And I was the breadwinner because my wife was doing her final year of pharmacy rotations, which means she was paying full tuition to work full-time and make $0. She was making negative money. And so that's how we got married. We had a very DIY wedding, and then we were ready to move to Texas when she graduated. And I said farewell to the church I was interning at and the student ministry, and they knew that I loved Chipotle. And so when they did their little send-off, they got me gift cards of Chipotle, which was so nice. And I'm not exaggerating when I say we had more money in Chipotle gift cards than we had in our bank account at the time we scooted in to Texas. And when we got there, we brought a couch, a TV, and a cooler, and a mattress. And so our living room was just a couch and a TV, which was sitting on a cooler that was serving as our entertainment center for the living room. Now, there was so much that we wanted to buy. We were calculating how long it could be until we could get more stuff. But man, I still think back about how much I missed that season of that couch and that cooler. Felt like we were on an indoor camping trip. Like it just felt like there was a level of peace in life. We just had what we needed and we enjoyed each other. I was significantly less stressed than I am about all sorts of stuff I got to deal with now and keep up with, and house things and yard work, whatever. It's fine. But we had Chipotle, and we had clothing, and we had Netflix, and with these we were content, and we just had a grand old time. It's always far easier, though, to look back on seasons of life and see where you should have had contentment in that season. It's harder to feel it in the moment of whatever season it is that you are in. Paul continues in verse 9. He takes a turn. He says this, "But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition." And we have to notice that this passage does not say that if you desire to be rich, then you're destroyed. It's not an immediate consequence. It is something you have set yourself up to fall into snares and traps of destruction. You could live for the pursuit of money and the desire to be rich and potentially thrive for an indefinite amount of time, but you have set yourself up to fall into destruction. It's like if I decided today, I want to make more time out of my day. I'm going to maximize my time now. And so to do that, I'm going to start speeding 30 miles an hour above the speed limit everywhere that I go. For a while, I might be successful, and it will truly pan out the way I set out to do so. I will get to where I'm going faster, and I will have more time in my day. But I have now set myself up for destruction. However, there's no set time for my downfall. There is no set time for when it will go wrong. I could continue on reaping the benefits of this terrible choice for who knows how long. It's a matter of time, though, before best case scenario, I suffer the consequences and it goes poorly, or worst case scenario, I hurt people I never meant to hurt because I was so focused on myself and what I could gain. That's why it would be so easy to ignore this sermon. It would be so easy to completely dismiss absolutely anything I say or unpack here, because there's no guarantee when letting money drive your choices would ever come back to bite you in any way. You could pursue money and it could seem fine and go great for you for an indefinite amount of time, even though you have set yourself up for destruction and to fall into snares and traps. Not only that, but it's so normal, especially in our little corner of the globe, to live that way. You wouldn't even stand out too much if you just worshiped money but sang songs to God. It would just be, you'd fit right in. Here's what Paul's crescendoing to. Here's what it's all been heading towards. And it says this in verse 10. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. All kinds of evil, not necessarily in the form of like Scrooge counting his gold coins while kids are starving in the street outside of his house. Not necessarily like that. Evil more so as in the 5 chapters worth of Paul's rant in this letter to Timothy that he has just been unpacking for them. Like chapter 1, he goes into following false and divisive teachers among them. Chapter 2, he unpacks disorder in worship. Chapter 3 talks about unqualified leaders. Chapter 4 is implementing unnecessary laws for Christians to follow. And then chapter 5 is disrespect for authority and elders. These are all areas of their life that need to be changed, need to be influenced. They definitely need to address. But at the root of it all, at what's driving all of it, is this love of money, or simply put, greed. Now, those issues from all those earlier chapters can feel very disconnected from a love of money, I'm aware. So I'm going to have this plant help us out. This is an English ivy, which I stole from our kids director, Jamie Twiddell's desk. Now, this English ivy is currently struggling with root rot. I don't know if you know much about root rot. I didn't until I started prepping this message. But there are 4 main signs for how you can tell that a plant is suffering with root rot. On the surface, you can see that there is wilting. There is wilting. The plant just doesn't hold itself the same. It becomes lower. Roots can't absorb water, and so they lose strength, and they just start dragging more and more each day. Next is yellow or brown leaves. The vibrance is gone. They are changing colors and they're losing life. They're still doing their job. They're still doing what leaves should do. They're still executing the jobs and tasks in front of them, but they are no longer growing or thriving. They're just trying to survive. And finally, stunted growth. The plant stops growing and just remains perpetually stuck, smaller than it was ever meant to live. It just relives the same day over and over. And then finally, mushy stems right above the soil line. Mushy stems, the base of the plant becomes soft and it can no longer withstand as much as it used to. It folds and it caves much easier when it is struck by random elements or hardships. Now we know, me and you, we're fully aware, as more complex, higher beings than this plant, that there is a deeper underlying issue going on, and we are aware of things like root rot. And yet, when it comes to our own life, and we see our own problems, the things we're struggling with, the things that are dragging us down, the things that make us feel like we are lifeless, we have such a surface level approach to address so much of it. When we feel like that we have got problems going on and we're starting to droop and we look at the surface, we book a vacation or we get a new grill or a new bag and manicure our yards. Even our church attendance can be part of a self-image improvement process we have put in place. Hear me. God has never been in the business of just making things look better. He has always wanted to go to the root of who we are, why we do what we do, and most of all, what is driving us? What is the desire of our heart? That's my first main point today, is that Jesus sees below the surface the root of your heart and motives. Jesus sees below the surface the root of your heart and motives. He sees the sins we struggle with. He sees the hardships that we're dealing with, but he also sees what's driving all of it. Yes, the church in Ephesus was struggling with disorder in worship, but they were also doing so because they were drawing too much attention to themselves, their knowledge, and their beauty, and away from God. Yes, they were struggling with following divisive teachers at the time, but that was coming because they were going after whoever was going to fuel them with what they wanted to hear and make life easier for them. Yes, they struggled with unqualified leaders. But that's because they were more concerned with what they could get away with, as opposed to what it looks like to love God's children well. They had unnecessary laws, but that's because grace is free and you can't take pride in a free gift. So they had to add in some rules that they could feel puffed up about. Yes, they struggled with disrespecting authority and elders, but that's because it didn't directly serve them in any way to show honor to elders. It was all rooted in greed and self-interest. What is at the root of how you see money? What is at the root of what's driving your view of money and what to do with money? It's crazy how we hear so many stories about the bad guys of the New Testament, which are like the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, the ones who were trying to force everyone to follow the rules just like them, but they missed the heart of it. But we're still tempted to see the world in those same black and white terms because it's so much easier for us. It would be so much simpler if God would just say, to get into heaven, everything over X amount of income must be given to the poor. If you keep more than that, then you're greedy and evil and I will cast you out. That's harsh, but it would make it all so much simpler as to what does it look like to live like Jesus. Instead, what we have is a God who is obsessed with your heart. What we have is a God who longs to be the treasure of your life. And that's so much trickier because it can look the same in two different people that have two different drives going on inside of them. You could live in the same neighborhood. You could have the same Zillow estimate on your house. You could work the same job. And yet, one could be driven by a desire to use their money and their resources for the kingdom and to bring glory to God. And the other can be driven to prove to their father how far they can get and how much they can succeed without him. The love of money, the love of self, greed is at the root of all kinds of evil, all kinds of sin, all kinds of brokenness, all kinds of wilting and stunted growth that we feel inside of us. While you're down, I'm going to go ahead and let Jesus kick you one more time because he comes in the Sermon on the Mount and he actually drops a line that is incomprehensible to the 21st century suburban mind. And he says this in his most famous sermon ever to crowds of people, again, oppressed and poor. And he tells them this in Matthew 6:24, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. That's a goofy word we don't use very often. Mammon. It's been encompassing all that we have been talking about. Mammon simply means money, wealth, or material possessions. However, what's very unique about how Jesus is using it in this sermon is that he has paralleled it with God. He has personified mammon and put it opposite to God as if it is this rivaling deity. Some early church leaders would come to refer to this personified deification of mammon and call it the devil of greed. Now, please note once again that this verse does not say that it is unwise to serve both mammon and God. It's unwise to serve two masters. He says it cannot be done. It is actually impossible. That's my next point for us today, is that it is impossible to serve Jesus and money. You have to choose. It is impossible to serve Jesus and money. You have to choose. I am fully aware that money is required to take care of your family. I'm fully aware that smart financial decisions today can set you up for more success later that allows you to be more generous later on. I'm fully aware of all of the spiritual and mental gymnastics that can be done to justify just about anything that Christians want to justify in this life. But at the end of the day, the only question I can ask and the only thing that matters and what God wants to know is, who is it all for? Who's it all for? What is driving your choices? Is it for your gain or for his? I admit that I baited you earlier with that Bonhoeffer quote because I'm bad cop. It's fine. But he finishes it with this. Let me read the whole thing. Why should we not be happy children of the world just because we are the children of God? After all, do we not rejoice in his good gifts? Do we not receive our treasure as a blessing from him? No. God and the world, God and its goods are incompatible because the world and its goods make a bid for our hearts. And only when they have won them, do they become what they really are. That is how they thrive, and that is why they are incompatible with allegiance to God. Our hearts have room for only one all-embracing devotion, and we can only cleave to one Lord. Every competitor to that devotion must be hated. As Jesus says, there is no alternative. Either we love God or we hate him. We are confronted with an either or. Either we love God or we love earthly goods. That's such a good line. Our hearts have room for only one all-embracing devotion. And we are the main competitors for that all-embracing devotion. Every single thing God has called us to, everything Jesus is longing to do and form inside of us, all of it comes down to uncoiling our hearts away from ourselves and pointing it back towards God and his children. This radical call to unconditional love that we're supposed to show towards those around us, it can't be done on your own power. This is where we lose it. You may have been with me all the way up to this point, but what we do with this information and with this teaching from Jesus, that is where it becomes game-changing as to whether or not it truly changes the root of what's going on in our life. I truly believe that some of the worst distortions of Christianity have been brought about by people who had the best intentions. They tried to contribute. They tried to add on and contribute and help out, but they were doing it by their own strength and with their own mind. And because of that, it made it about themselves. The Apostle Paul, later in his ministry, teaches what it is we should do with this information, because as he continues on church planning and writing letters and preaching the gospel, he gets locked up for preaching that there is another king other than Caesar. And in prison, he writes his prison letters. And while doing that, he writes a letter to the Philippians. And in that letter, he is schooling believers on the concept of joy and contentment from prison, not knowing how much longer he will live. And he says this in Philippians 4:11-13, for one of the most misquoted verses in the entire Bible. Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. This was not a verse that was originally written with the intention of winning football games. This was a verse that was meant to withstand absolutely any hardship that this world could possibly throw at us. Paul was a Pharisee, a leader of the Pharisees, which basically just means he was more religious than you and I will ever be, and it got him nowhere. It accomplished nothing for him. He only unlocked true contentment. He only came to the point of reaching true joy, true contentment, and withstanding anything the world could possibly throw at him when he relied on Christ alone to be his strength, to win the all-embracing devotion of his heart. And that's my final thought today, is that it is impossible to be truly content unless Jesus is transforming you. The response to this is not for you to pick yourself up by your bootstraps. You've been going to church. You've been studying the Bible. It's time you act like it. That's not the next step. It is to let Jesus and the gospel transform you from the inside out. It is impossible to be truly content unless Jesus is transforming you. The answer to breaking away from our love of money, the answer to uncoiling our hearts away from itself, the answer to eliminate our worship of mammon, the answer to your root rot problem is Jesus and Jesus alone. He modeled that radical unconditional love for us, and he pointed that radical unconditional love to us. We cannot allow our faith, we can't allow our church attendance to simply lead us to surface level behavior modification when we're just trying to change our leaves and prop up stems. We have got to look at the sin that is too deep within us for us to pull out on our own and look to the only one, Jesus, who alone has conquered sin, alone offers us new life and transforms us from the inside out. I don't need to tell y'all to give in this sermon, because if Jesus actually becomes the all-encompassing treasure of your heart, then your time, your talent, your money, all of it will naturally flow towards his kingdom and his redemption work in this world. I'm sorry, I started to get good cop there. I'll revert back. I'll reel it back in. I have a challenge I want to leave you with. I want some simple steps to help you to choose God over mammon on a reoccurring basis. The first one is simplicity. Simplicity. Would this be a season in which one of your theme words and prayers would be simplicity in your life? The accumulation of all that we have is not linear. It is a snowball. It was far easier for me to be content when all we had was a couch and a cooler with a TV propped up on top of it. Now I've got a house and I want a deck and there's so many other things that are starting to pile on, and it just starts ramping up exponentially. If you simplify your life, we would take a step towards simplicity. It becomes easier and easier to rely on God and recognize and be appreciative of what it is we have. Or as the Prince of Egypt, I love, puts it, when all you have is nothing, there's enough to go around. Would you look at how to do that? Would you donate your clothes? Would you put on a free garage sale? Would you simplify what it is you have and begin to see Jesus and see him more clearly through all of the rest of the mess in your life? And then second, we got simplicity and then transparency. What we keep in the darkness is what sin can most easily corrupt. If we keep it to ourselves and we don't want to let anyone else in, if we don't bring it into the light, it is harder to allow Jesus to do a work in us or for the church to build itself up, to spur each other on towards love and good deeds when we are hiding the spaces in our life we are trying to grow towards love and good deeds. Would you consider letting another couple in your grace group review over or maybe build out your first budget with you? You say, hey, or let them call you out in accountability. Say, hey, I've started to feel like I'm supposed to ask my waiters if I should pray for them and tip 30% when I go out to eat. God brought that to my mind today. I'm bringing it up to you because if I don't tell anyone, it'll be so easy for me to do it once and let it just slowly fade, because that's kind of a steep call. And so I'm telling you because I want you to hold me to it. I want to follow through with this. Would you invite others in to the commitments that you're making? Or would you simply ask for help and say, hey, I'm struggling right now. Right now, money, I'm barely getting by and I don't want to. Would you have the humility to say to someone else in the church, you seem to be really good with money. You seem better with money than me. Would you help me so that I can be generous? I want to be a part of that. I want to give. I want to bless others in all the ways I possibly can and bless others with more of what God has given me. Man, those are the types of money conversations I want to have more in church. Those are the types of hearts that I think the world is far more desperate for. It is longing to hear people having and that they want to join in with. That's the type of faith that has power. And so maybe we see money as God sees. May we love how he loves. Love well, Grace Church.